Welcome to the Consulting Success Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Zapersky. In this podcast, we'll dive deep into the world of elite consultants, where you'll learn the strategies, tactics, and mindset to grow a highly profitable and successful consulting business. Hey, it's Michael Zapersky, and today I'm very excited to have Noelle Mykolenko joining us. Noelle, welcome.
Thank you, Michael.
Yeah, really excited to have you joining us here today. For those who don't know you, aren't familiar with your work, Noelle, explain briefly what you do.
Sure. Thanks, Michael. I am an independent consultant, and I also work with an organization called the Trusted Advisor Associates. My area of focus in consulting, which dovetails nicely with what I do with Trusted Advisor Associates, is on growth, both personal growth and organizational growth, primarily focused on top-line expansion, not so much on cost-cutting or optimization below the top line. In where I am in my career now, I'm very energized around the relationships that we have with our clients and building those relationships to grow both the relationships and the business we do, primarily through increasing the trust that we have between consultant and client.
Love it. Definitely want to explore that with you further because I think that's a really important topic for us to look at. Before we get there, though, how did you get into consulting? I mean, let's just kind of go back to the early days. What was your path to consulting?
I won't call it a non-traditional path to consulting, but I did come into consulting almost accidentally. After I graduated college with an undergraduate degree in business, I was working supporting a government agency, and I was working with the information management department, specifically around their strategic planning. And honestly, one day my client looked at me and said, "You really have a lot of potential. You should consider going back to school to get a master's of business administration." And so I went in, got my MBA from University of Virginia, and that's really where I discovered, as embarrassing as it sounds at this point, I discovered consulting as a career track. I hadn't even realized that it was there, and the opportunity to engage in multiple different problem-solving situations sequentially really appealed to me. I thought it was a great opportunity to learn about different facets of the business in a very meaningful way, and to really put to work all of the aspects of my Master's of Business Administration. So when I left my MBA program, I went to work for one of the large commercial consulting firms, and after a few years realized that what drew me to consulting was working with the people more than anything else. So given the timing of it, this was around 2002, 2003. I switched out of commercial consulting and focused in the federal business, supporting the federal government, and moved to a large IT outsourcer, Computer Sciences Corporation, and worked in more the strategic consulting, organizational development, and process improvement area. And through that, worked as a consultant, got into management, into sales management, and my last role after 12 years at CSC was Director of Client Development. That was my absolute favorite role. What I realized through that role and through the sales leadership and marketing roles that I had had up to that point was that all of the internal planning and strategy around growing our client accounts was nothing more than an academic exercise if we weren't really paying attention to what our clients had to tell us.
Right.
And so when I left CSC, I kind of did a full circle, came back to my roots, and started consulting around growing the business through specifically engaging clients through client account development, client relationship development. And that's really where I ended up back with Trusted Advisor Associates as well. We work with organizations, companies, nonprofits, government organizations, day in and day out, who are focused on improving their client relationships through building better trust.
So we're going to get to that because that's an area that I'm very passionate about in terms of establishing trust and nurturing and valuing relationships. Let's stick with the early days for a moment. You went into one of the larger consulting firms, I believe it was Booz Allen Hamilton?
It was Booz Allen Hamilton.
Okay. So you were there, and what did you take away from that experience? Were there any specific, like just key learnings or ideas that even today stick with you, or that when you transitioned out and eventually establish your own consulting firm, you feel really played an important role? And I ask because we work with a lot of consultants who have been a part of some form of established consulting company, often, one of the large ones. But I'm always interested to know, like, What did you take from that experience? What really stood out? What was the best practices that you think were most valuable for you during that time?
Sure. That's a great question, Michael. I think, keep in mind, you're stretching me to go back a little bit. My time with Booz Allen Hamilton was incredibly rewarding and enriching. And the two key influences that I took away from Booz Allen Hamilton were, one, the rigor with which we approached the work. That it was great to go in and have a hypothesis about what the problem is and how we might solve it. And the hypotheses came generally from our experience with other clients or other situations that somewhat matched what our current client was going through. But then taking that hypothesis and very rigorously investigating through data and facts and information gathering to make sure that we weren't misapplying something that we had learned and solved in a different situation to our client's specific situation. So the rigor, the investigation, the factual nature of the business being applied to the specific situation in which our client found themselves. That was the number one value that I got from Booz Allen, learning how to do that. The second one, equally important, quite frankly, was the value of the people and the diversity of the people that we had, both within the consultancy, but also the value of the clients. And I think it's easy for consultants to fall into the trap, if I dare say it, maybe a little bit of arrogance, feeling that because we're the ones who are being called on to help solve a problem, that we have some special capability beyond what the clients have. And in my experience, and I think that the diversity of people that I worked with at Booz Allen and the many, many talents that were brought to the game, both from us and from our clients, showed me that we all have a lot to contribute. And it's absolutely vital not to overlook the contributions of anyone on the team.
Right. I think those are really important lessons. The first one really resonates because I think that there's a lot of people who go into a situation with a client and try and shove their hypothesis down the throat of the client and try and just believe that they know what the issue is, but don't spend enough time gathering data or looking at best practices or having the kinds of conversations or doing the research that is needed to really support that, to ensure that you're going to get the best result and outcome for the client.
Absolutely. And Michael, if I can just follow up on that for a second, even if the hypothesis is right from the beginning, it doesn't necessarily mean that the client is going to be ready or able to hear what the solution might be because they might not believe that we've fully investigated their situation.
So what do you do when that happens? Because I can just see the image right now of a client very set in their ways. I know I've worked with clients like this many times before who have, maybe it's even a family business, or it's just they have their procedures, they have their processes, they have their ways of thinking about things. And then they also recognize that there's an issue. And so they bring a consultant in to help them to solve that issue, but they're very resistant to change. They look at your initial findings or your initial suggestions and recommendations. And even though maybe it might seem to you like deep down they know that what you're saying is right, they won't allow you to move forward quickly because there's hesitation, there's resistance. What do you do in that situation? What have you found is the best practice or just some good steps to move a client from a position of resistance to one of acceptance in a way that serves their ultimate desires and goals?
Yeah, absolutely. That situation is so common. And I would posit that it's probably more the norm than the exception. And if we think about it, if I were to put myself into my client's shoes, I would feel the exact same way. There would be a part of me that says, even if I'm the one who made the decision to bring in an outside consultant, there would still be a part of me that says, but wait, this person doesn't really know everything I know. They don't really understand everything I understand. And so in my experience, that situation arises typically from one of two things. First, it's fear on the part of the client. Fear of the unknown or an attachment to something that has served them well in the past, and so they just can't see a different way of doing it. Secondly, it arises when the client simply doesn't feel that the consultant has really heard them and understood what their perspective is. In either situation or either cause of that situation, the answer is still the same, and that is deep, curious listening to the client, to what they're trying to achieve, to what they've tried in the past, to why it's important for them to be successful, why it's important for them to be focusing on whatever the change initiative is at hand, and deeper than just, we have to get our numbers up. we have to grow the top line or we need to cut our costs. Really understanding what's important about how they're going to go about to do that and making sure that it aligns to the client's culture, to the client's values, and to what they see as the future of their business. And I find usually by listening, and when I say listening, I mean more than just taking notes and letting the other person talk. I mean actively engaging and validating back to them that I'm hearing what it is that they're saying, both on a rational level around the data, but also on a non-rational level around the emotion that's tied up in their business, their fears about the situation and what might happen, their hopes and dreams for what opportunities may present themselves. If I can demonstrate through actively listening very empathetically that I understand where they're trying to go, I find that resistance just starts to fade away. It almost dissolves. Because then they have the confidence that I'm on their side and I really understand what they're trying to achieve and I'm willing to partner with them to achieve it for their benefit, just so I can put a tick mark on my books and say, yep, there was another successful consulting engagement.
And in your experience, is just as true both when you're working with a client you've already won their business, so you're active in the engagement, as it is when you're speaking with a prospective client and you're in that sales conversation?
Absolutely, it is just as important. And it's funny, while you were asking me that question, I have this little internal shorthand that I use, and I call it keeping the love alive. And just like in any other relationship, that old saying goes that familiarity breeds contempt. Mm-hmm. And I'll speak for myself. It's easy for me to take for granted the relationships that I've established with my clients. And so there are times when I have a long-standing client. Sure, sometimes it's easier for me to say, hey, I know we have this meeting. I have a new potential client. Can I shift your meeting? Because there's trust there. There's already an existing relationship, and it gives me a certain amount of elasticity with the relationship. And so it's important to keep top of mind that we need to feed and nurture those ongoing relationships with clients just as much as we need to feed and nurture the new relationships with potential clients or with brand new clients.
Definitely. So your focus is to help people in sales and consultative roles achieve their goals through improved client focus, as you mentioned. What are some of the key ways, and I think we're getting into this now, but in your mind, what are some of the biggest and most important, the key ways of actually doing that, of really leveraging and supporting the focus on the client to win greater business, to achieve better outcomes? What stands out for you?
While we work with a lot of seasoned and experienced consultants here at Consulting Success, I'm often contacted by new early-stage consultants. Invariably, the question I'm asked is, what are the steps I should take to become a successful consultant and grow my consulting business to my first 6 figures per year? Well, I'm excited to announce that we've opened the doors for our Momentum program. This is our most popular program for early stage consultants, and it has helped almost 1,000 consultants to start, run, and grow successful consulting businesses. It gives you the step-by-step plan to help you with your messaging, your fees, and pricing strategies, how to win more proposals, how to go to market more effectively, developing a marketing system to generate leads consistently, and so much more. And right now, until September the 19th, you can sign up for Momentum and get 50% off the regular price by going to consultingsuccess.com/audio. That's consultingsuccess.com/audio, AUDIO. Only 100 spots are available to join Momentum and get 50% off. This deal is only available until September the 19th or until all 100 spots are gone. We won't be opening up new spots in this program for several months, so don't wait. Go to consultingsuccess.com/audio. That's consultingsuccess.com/audio, AUDIO.
So the things that really stand out for me, the first one is what I've been talking about. It's maintaining that listening and the ability to listen and to be empathetic with the client, no matter what the situation. I'm going to start weaving in a little bit of the trusted advisor concepts here. Being a trusted advisor, the way we define it at Trusted Advisor Associates, is really being a safe haven for tough issues. And that means a safe haven for any tough issue, not just a tough issue for which I may have a solution. And so it's really about bringing that relationship to the next level and being open to having the personal relationship on top of the professional relationship.
I mean, listening, you mentioned, is obviously an important one, and being very present. But beyond that, what are some very practical steps that our listeners could take that would help them to start moving in that direction of really becoming a trusted advisor with their own clients?
Sure. I think the biggest step they can take is to be willing to take small personal risks in service of the relationship. We tend to think that most of what we bring to the table is our smarts, our capabilities. I can do a good strategic plan. I can put together a pipeline review that's going to work. In fact, those are the attributes that we bring. They're almost table stakes. And so to really grow beyond the transactional, my client needs a solution and I can provide the solution, into a long-term relationship, it requires us taking small personal risks and going beyond just answering the question of the day.
So what are those small personal risks?
So the small personal risks can be any number of things. I would say, first off, again, it's around being curious and being willing to go out on a limb in your client's business area. So have a point of view. Share a point of view about something that is not directly related to the work that you're doing. Being willing, if you see something in the business while you're doing a consulting engagement, to say, listen, I know this isn't in the area that you asked me to look at, but I can't help noticing that you might have another opportunity over here. The biggest personal risk, and it's part of the paradoxical nature of building trust, would be if you come across something that you recognize the client needs help and it's not something that you can help them. To be able to say to the client, here's an opportunity. I really don't think I'm the right person to help you with this, but I'd be more than happy to help you find someone who might be, right? I mean, referring to a competitor, it feels like the most risky thing we can do because we don't want to lose that client relationship. In fact, it almost always comes back tenfold in loyalty from the client.
So what I'm hearing you say, to confirm for everyone, it's about finding, as an example, opportunities within client engagement or a relationship where most people might say, I'm going to try and keep as much business as I can for myself. I'm working with this client. I've actually identified another area that I can help them in, and maybe I'll give them a proposal for that area, or I'll wait until we're done this initial project and then I'll try and talk to them about that. But I'm going to keep that to myself, even though maybe it's not the best thing that I could do. Maybe I could assemble a team. I could try and get through it. But what you're saying is, instead of doing that, if it's not within your core skill set, in the client's best interest and actually in your best interest, would be to let them know, listen, I found this opportunity. It's not something that I can help you with, but I can put you in touch or suggest someone or the characteristics of someone that could help you with this.
Absolutely.
So have you seen firsthand, because I think a lot of people listening to this will have some level of hesitation or fear with that, because again, it's moving a transaction or potential revenue away, which is something that a lot of independent consultants or consulting firm owners, right? They're trying to grow revenue. They're not trying to move away from those opportunities. Yet it sounds like what you've seen firsthand is actually will help you to grow your business. It's just the difference between playing a short-term game and the long-term game.
Exactly. And you nailed it. It's all that focus on the long term. If we were to treat every transaction with a client as though it were number, say, 15 out of 32, suddenly the need that we have to capture that one transaction gets put into better perspective. And it may make sense then to say, I'm going to take a pass on this transaction because I know that I have a long and healthy relationship with this client, and that's where I want to stay focused.
So let me ask you this. The focus, I mean, that to me makes total sense, because I'm a very big believer in the long term. Everything that we do here at Consult Success is guided by the long term. Yet at the same time, I remember those early days starting my first consulting business. If I was only to think about long term, I wouldn't be putting food on the table. I needed to ensure that there was also revenue coming in to support. At that time, it was just myself. I wasn't married, didn't have a family. But for people who are in the situation where they're earlier stage in their business and they don't yet have enough revenue and sales that can support that longer term thinking and mindset, what would you say to them? What should they be doing to ensure that they can get to that place where they have enough short-term revenue coming in that allows them to start to think longer term?
Wow, that is a really great question. And I'm trying to put myself into that situation. I don't think it really changes my answer. Because taking on a project for which I'm not, and again, I'll make this very personal for me. If I take on a project for which I don't believe I'm the best consultant to do it, the risk of me doing a mediocre job, then losing the client's future work because I took on something that wasn't in my bailiwick, is bigger than I'm willing to take personally. And I guess my experience has been when I've been in a situation like that, when I was called in fact, it happened to me in January. I was called in for a potential project. I spoke with the client. He explained what the situation was, what they were looking for. And I said flat out, I don't think I'm the best person to do this for you. I'm more than happy to recommend somebody else. Here's how I look at the situation. And what ended up happening, instead of moving that project to another consultant, he actually modified what it was that he was trying to do. Yeah. He said, it's an interesting approach. And when you describe it that way, I can see us addressing the situation differently. And so he rescoped the project that he had in mind in order to bring me in. And that didn't happen because I happen to be such a great consultant. It's not that I am that much better than anybody else out there. I firmly believe it's because he trusted me when I said, I'm not the right person for that type of work. And his response was, great, then let's find work that you can do.
I think that's such a great example. These days, probably more than before, just because there's so many more people offering their services and promoting their products and so forth. Trust is really limited. Like, it's limited in the sense that it just doesn't, people don't feel, I think, the same level of trust maybe that they did before. And even to the point of when you're growing up, you would never lock your door. Now you lock your door, you turn on the alarm, you shut some bars, and you have the guard dog. Like, it's just a different environment, society that a lot of us live in these days. And I think that's such a beautiful example of the value and the importance of trust. Because you're right. Why would you look for someone else when you found someone that you feel that you can actually trust? And that's just such a great lesson. So thanks for sharing that with us, Noelle.
You're welcome.
What mistake do you see consultants making often that, if corrected, would really help them to be more successful?
Oh, that's actually an easy one. The biggest mistake that I see consultants make is really leading fully with the rational, the credibility. They come in and say, look, I'm very, very smart. Here's all the data. I've got the answer to your problem. Let me take a step back and try to explain this within a little bit of a larger context. When we build trust in relationships, we build trust both through our capabilities and the smarts that we bring to the table, but also through our more emotional connection with people, where our focus is, if we're focused on their best outcomes versus our own best outcomes, and the ability that we have to connect with other people on a personal level. And the mistake I see consultants making is that they go in and they think that clients are 100% focused on the smarts and the processes and the solutions that they can bring into a situation. And in fact, if you think about how clients make their purchasing decisions, for the most part, by the time they're having a conversation with a potential consultant, they already have done some level of vetting around the capabilities of that consultant. So they generally have an idea that the consultant is able to solve the problem that they're bringing them in for. And consultants tend to forget that the clients have already gone through that vetting step. And so when they're in the situation of actually engaging for a potential engagement or in the middle of delivering an engagement, they still feel like they need to be proving themselves on the basis of their capabilities and their intelligence and their solutions. And if the consultant can get themselves over that hump, stipulate up front with the client or the potential client, hey, look, we all know that we have the ability to do this. Focus on, can we work well together? Do I want to work with you? Do you want to work with me? Do I understand where you're trying to go? And can I demonstrate to you that I understand what's important to you? That's where the sale is really made. That's how we influence them to take our advice. That's how we get them to adopt our solution and agree to what it is that we're proposing in front of them.
I think that's great advice and a really good reminder for people. Your marketing is the place where you're going to be establishing your credibility and your expertise. And that's the moment that you start to engage with a client and have a conversation. There's a full switch. Your marketing might talk a lot more about you, even though it should be focused on the client so that it resonates with them and gets their attention and interest. But the moment that you actually engage and have a conversation with the client, you want to switch to listening to them. The focus is not on you and what you can do. To the vast majority of the conversation should really be about the client, as Noelle has been sharing with us. So I think that's a really great reminder. As you're working, Noelle, you have your foot in with trusted advisors. You're working that angle. You're an independent consultant working that angle. How do you approach, or what is your approach to kind of work-life balance? How do you manage all of this stuff and still stay healthy and motivated and excited to continue doing what you're doing?
The short answer to that is I love what I do. And so I take so much energy from everything that I do when I'm working with my clients. The not so short answer is that I augment myself with support who takes over a lot of the administrative tasks, because that's not an area where I get a lot of energy in those things that I have to do, right? There are some aspects of running my business that I'm the only one that I can do. I actually do my own bookkeeping, my own invoicing. I keep my own client relationship contact lists, and I manage all of the communication with my clients myself. And I find that, again, it goes back to what I learned early in my consulting days. It's about the rigor and having a process in place so that I know at any point in time what needs to be done. I'm able to prioritize and reprioritize as necessary so that the most important tasks are being taken care of. I have had to learn to let go of some things that I would like to be managing for my business, but aren't necessarily critical to my business. For example, it's really around some of the rigor with which I manage my priorities. I tend to work more on the fly than I'm necessarily comfortable with, because I found at one point it was taking me even more time to go back and formally reprioritize things than actually to just do the things that I needed to be doing. So I'm working with a little more ambiguity in my management than I'm entirely comfortable with. But the alternative was I was spending too much of my own personal time, my weekend time, my evening time, going back and doing administrative work that was very low value for me.
Because you have the administrative support handled by someone else or other people, that allows you to have a little bit more ambiguity or a little bit more kind of free form time in your schedule.
It does. Again, it's because I've prioritized those things that I like to do least, that are not absolutely client critical. And those are the pieces that I'm able to pass off to administrative support.
And did you do that right away, or is that something that you just learned later on that was something that you probably should have done and started earlier?
It's definitely something I learned. The reason I learned it through experience, it was not because I wanted to have more of my personal time back. It was because I'm really lousy at doing some of that administrative stuff, the things that I don't like to do. And there were too many things that were falling through the cracks.
Right.
And so I hired somebody to do what I don't like to do so I could focus on doing the things I do like to do.
Yeah, I see this consistently, that there's almost always a significant amount of activities and tasks that any consultant is currently doing that they should not be doing, that is low value work that you don't enjoy, but also doesn't create that much value for your business, but it is necessary. And it's amazing that as soon as you find someone or people or a way, a system or a process or a service that can help you to remove that off of your plate and put onto someone else's, freeing that time up to then allow you to spend more time on high value tasks and work and activities, not only can make you much more productive and more energized, but also will help the business to grow significantly. Has that been your experience as well?
Absolutely.
Great. Well, Noelle, I've really enjoyed this conversation. I want to thank you again for coming on here today. What's the best way for people to learn more about your work and to connect with you?
People can connect with me on LinkedIn. And to learn more about, I really recommend that they go to the Trusted Advisor Associates website. It's trustedadvisor.com, and they'll find a wealth of information about trust relationships. They can find my bio on there and learn a little more about what we do.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again. Check the show notes, everyone. Go to consultingsuccess.com, and you'll find, when you look up Noelle's podcast here, we'll have in the show notes all the links to her bio and other information and resources and so forth. Well, thank you again.
Thank you very much, Michael.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Consulting Success Podcast. For more episodes and to subscribe, rate, and leave a review, head on over to iTunes. And if you'd like to develop consistent lead flow and a highly profitable consulting business, learn more about our coaching programs at consultingsuccess.com.